Three men in black suits cornered her at work and smiled. Our boss wants to meet his rival's new pet. They made the biggest mistake of their miserable lives. When Dominic Lavelle found out a rival Mafia family put their hands on his sweet, innocent librarian girlfriend, he didn't try to negotiate. He showed up, pulled her behind his back, and promised a total bloodbath. If you love stories where the ruthless villain is fiercely protective of the good girl, you have to hear this.
The camera pans down to the freezing November street, settling on a young woman named Lily. She stands shivering outside a club draped in heavy velvet, the neon signs reflecting in the puddles at her feet. Her phone is completely dead, a useless piece of glass in her trembling hands. She crosses her arms tight against her chest, a fragile silhouette of pure vulnerability. She never even wanted to be here. A co-worker pushed her into coming out, and now she is stranded. You and I have probably both made this mistake. We ignore our own comfort zones just to keep the peace. But the cold truth is, when we abandon our own boundaries to please other people, we step right into the crosshairs of those waiting in the dark. Picture the quiet life she usually leads. Her world is built of soft pages in a sterile library, returning home only to the gentle purr of her cat. The loudest thing she ever experiences is the release of a new novel. But right now, abandoned by her friend Emma, she is adrift in a loud, foreign city without a single dollar or a working phone. The panic rises in her throat, creating an empty space just waiting to be filled. There's a harsh lesson buried in this moment. Isolation is the exact soil where dangerous manipulation takes root. Suddenly, the heavy tavern doors swing open, spilling a rush of heat and deafening music into the freezing night. Her heart sinks. She turns fast, and her eyes lock directly onto him. Enter Dominic. He moves like a shadow cut from the very fabric of the night, dressed in tailored darkness that seems to swallow the streetlights around him. Two massive bodyguards flank his sides, moving in perfect, silent synchrony. It is the undeniable physical footprint of a man who owns everything he looks at. Lily instantly takes a step back, her breath catching as a cold sweat breaks across her skin. But Dominic is already speaking, his voice cutting through the noise, casually pointing out her dead screen. It is a chilling reminder for anyone paying attention. Predators do not go hunting for a fair fight or a strong opponent. They simply scan the crowd for a cracked defense. He closes the distance without making a single sound. She manages to force out a weak claim that she is fine, but the violent shaking in her voice gives the lie away immediately. Dominic leans in, his expression unreadable, and casually mentions he has been watching her stand there for 20 long minutes. The realization that she has been studied for that long wraps her throat like a tight wire. He tells her she will not be walking home tonight, and the sheer gravity of his confidence paralyzes her. Then he reaches out and hands her a brand new, high-end phone. Listen closely, because we cannot miss this reality. The most dangerous traps in this life are rarely forced upon us with violence. More often than not, they are handed over with a smile, beautifully disguised as salvation. Every muscle in his body, and the rigid stances of the men behind him, screams silent violence. When Lily nervously questions why he is helping her, he leans closer, quietly laying out the exact statistics of women who vanish from this very street. He paints a terrifying picture, positioning himself as the only safe harbor in a deadly storm. As he steps into her personal space, the rich, heavy scent of dark cedar washes over her, locking his memory into her brain. He presses the cold phone into her hand, his fingers deliberately lingering against her skin. The sudden warmth sends a shock straight through her chest. It is a quiet tragedy. When a person goes too long without human touch, even a dangerous spark can override every basic survival instinct. The bright screen glows in her palm, showing only one contact saved in the memory, just the letter D. When Lily stammers, struggling to make sense of this strange gift, Dominic cuts her off with a smooth, low command, telling her she does not need to understand it right now. Right on cue, a sleek black town car glides up to the curb, a silent flex of his endless resources. One of the massive guards opens the back door, but Lily steps away, her primal alarm bells finally ringing loud enough to refuse the ride. Dominic just smiles, a slow, approving grin, and calls her a smart girl. It feels like a father praising a child. We have to remember how dark this gets. True control is absolute when the victim is entirely convinced they are just being cared for. The phone has 0 security locks, wiping out any friction between her and his demands. Her hands shaking, Lily dials her roommate and quickly secures a ride home, arriving in just 10 minutes. Relief washes over her face as she tries to hand the expensive device back to the shadow standing before her. But Dominic refuses to take it. His entire demeanor shifts, dropping his voice to a low, hypnotic register. He gives her a strict list of demands. Go straight home, lock every door, and call him the second she is safe inside. By all logic, she should be screaming for the police. But the first quiet seeds of captor fixation are already taking root in her tired mind. It shows us a frightening truth. Genuine dominance never actually needs to raise its voice. Right before he steps away, he asks for her name. All her protective walls crumble, and she whispers the word Lily without a single ounce of resistance. If you look closely, you can see the dangerous shift in his eyes, a hungry look buried under layers of cold control. He murmurs her name slowly, tasting the syllables as if permanently claiming them. Climbing into the back of his armored car, he issues one final, rapid command for her to stay alive. Desperate to balance the scales, she demands to know who he is, but he only offers a dark smile, telling her she already holds the answer. The car vanishes into the night like a ghost. The hardest reality to face is this. Once a psychopath weaponizes your curiosity, it becomes an unbreakable chain around your neck. The entire ride home, she keeps her fingers wrapped tightly around the borrowed glass and metal. The logical move is staring her right in the face. Throw the phone out the window, walk into a police station, and report the encounter. Instead, we watch a tragic psychological surrender unfold. Driven by a pull she cannot explain, she pushes the call button. The line clicks open instantly, proving he has been sitting in the dark, waiting for her. His voice is a fake blanket of warmth as he demands to know if she locked the deadbolt. When the call abruptly ends, Lily is left gasping in the quiet of her hallway, her chest heaving with adrenaline. If we learn anything from this wreckage, it is that a deeply fractured mind will happily choose a warm captor over a cold reality. The small, predictable world she spent years building has officially shattered. She becomes deeply obsessed with the man from the shadows, mesmerized by the illusion that he sees right through her skin. Naturally, her ability to sleep completely vanishes. She lies awake for hours, her mind playing his voice on a continuous loop, echoing the exact way his lips formed her name. The most terrifying shift happens by dawn. She no longer looks at the black phone as a piece of evidence, but as a promise of their next meeting. It sits on her desk like an unexploded bomb, waiting to level her life. It highlights a painful flaw in human nature. When a life is completely empty of passion, it will blindly reach for the very fire that is guaranteed to burn it straight to the ground. The morning light offers no rescue. Even sitting at her desk, the phone acts like a heavy magnet, dragging her focus away from reality. A concerned coworker immediately picks up on her frantic energy, noticing the way her hands keep trembling over her keyboard. When asked if she is going through a bad breakup, Lily instantly lies to protect the secret, proving she is already isolating herself. During her lunch break, she finally digs into the phone memory. It is completely barren. No old texts, no hidden apps, just a massive, empty cage designed to trap her attention. But tucked deep inside the leather case, she finds a heavy, matte black business card. It is a tragic realization to witness. Secrecy is always the thickest mortar used to build a prison for the human mind. The card feels like a heavy weight in her palm, bearing only a name and a city stamped in silver ink. Dominic Lavelle. Her fingers fly across the keyboard, frantically searching the web for a face, a history, anything at all. The results are dry. He is listed as a major donor to a few charities, a classic smokescreen used by men who own the underworld, but his personal footprint is absolutely non-existent. He exists strictly in the shadows. Feeling sick, Lily leaves work early, locking herself alone in her apartment with the bait. A tiny voice in her head, and screams at her to throw the card away, to run while she still can, but her toxic curiosity has already won the war. The abyss never actually has to reach out and grab us. It just waits patiently for us to lean over the edge. 20 minutes later, logic loses the war to something much darker. Lily walks slowly back into the jaws of her nightmare. The afternoon sun tries to soften the brutal lines of the building, but the concrete still feels like an open tomb. Inside, the camera pushes in on a worker sweeping the floor. He barks an order to leave until her trembling hand holds up the heavy black phone. We hear the sharp intake of his breath. He recognizes the device instantly and melts into the shadows. Dominic's invisible hand is everywhere. The heavy silence of the empty hall presses down on Lily's shoulders, making her feel painfully small. We often forget that true power does not need to shout. It simply whispers, and the rest of the world bows its head in absolute compliance. The camera pans slowly as Dominic steps from the gloom, perfectly timing his entrance to make her heart skip a painful beat. Under the unforgiving daylight, you and I can see the tragic contradictions of his life. A faded scar speaks of ruthless violence, right above a suit and a watch worth a fortune. He murmurs her name, shaping the syllables into a velvet trap. Her shaking hand offers the phone, but he does not take it right away. Instead, he steps into her space, his cold eyes stripping away her defenses frame by frame. When his fingers finally brush hers to take the device, a fatal spark seals the tragic bond. The saddest truth about the dark side of humanity is this: true monsters never break down the door. They simply wait for us to hand them the key. Let us zoom in on this tragic dance. We will look past the illusion of romance together, finding the poison underneath. Dominic's dark eyes lock onto the shadows under Lily's eyes. He watches her fingers nervously twist her necklace. The lighting here is cold, highlighting that this is not care. It is a hunter finding a soft spot in the armor. His voice drops an octave as he points out she gave up her only free hour just to come to him. The camera holds on her panicked face. She is terrified because he sees right through to her soul. He asks if she has eaten, laying the very first stone of her invisible prison. It is a harsh reality of life that the deepest emotional betrayals often begin wrapped in the gentle disguise of someone pretending to care for your well-being. Watch the frame tighten as her freedom evaporates. Dominic does not ask. He commands her to eat with him, brushing aside her job as if it means nothing. The ambient sound fades, leaving only his deep, steady voice. He tells her he watched her check her watch 3 times. It is a chilling level of surveillance painted over with a romantic brush. Lily's breath hitches. Every instinct tells her to run far away from this man. But he leans in, casting a long shadow over her, framing his control as the only safe harbor in a cruel world. He promises they are only strangers for now, his dark certainty hitting her like a physical blow. Her shoulders drop, and she simply nods. We must always remember that giving up our choices, piece by piece, is exactly how we end up losing our entire souls. The scene cuts to a heavy, suffocating room. Dark oak, rich leather, the smell of expensive cologne. Every prop here is designed to scream wealth and absolute authority. Dominic has a gourmet meal waiting, terrifying proof that he knew she would surrender. The only sound is the clinking of silver in the heavy silence. Lily speaks softly, a tear threatening to spill, confessing she loves her quiet library job because it feels safe. Dominic leans back into the shadows and strikes at her heart. He drags up the pure terror she felt the night before, tearing down her fragile walls. He forces her to feel the cold reality of her own vulnerability. It teaches us a bitter lesson. When someone convinces you the entire world is dark, they easily become kovly source of it. The camera stays low, making Dominic look like a dark god surveying his kingdom. He takes a slow sip of wine and casually mentions he owns the very ground beneath her feet, a masterstroke to make her feel trapped in his web. Lily's voice trembles when she asks what he actually does. His answer is a chilling whisper about solving problems. The lighting catches the ruthless glint in his eye. She senses the violence lurking under his tailored suit. With her pulse pounding in her throat, she asks if she should be afraid. Any decent man would comfort her. Instead, Dominic smiles, a cold, terrifying look, and tells her yes, she should be. Fear is a strange and tragic emotion. Sometimes the very thing that terrifies us is the exact same thing we foolishly run toward for shelter. This is the exact frame where the tragedy locks into place. Dominic plays his cruelest card, offering her the illusion of an open door. He whispers that she can walk away tomorrow, but the background music swells with a dark, heavy cello note as he promises to keep watching her from the shadows. He twists, stalking into an act of twisted devotion. When her tear-filled eyes search his face, asking why he picked her, he delivers a beautifully lethal lie. He paints himself as a lonely, bleeding soul, claiming she is the only one who looks at him with pure trust. He weaponizes her own gentle heart against her. It is a heartbreaking reminder that our greatest vulnerability is not our fear, but our desperate, aching desire to heal the brokenness we see in others. The scene shifts to the doorway. As she goes to leave, his large hand presses against the small of her back. The camera lingers on this touch. It is not affectionate, but deeply territorial. He takes her phone, typing in his number, and his deep voice commands her to call him the second the dark the scare. He knows she is suffocating in her quiet, boring life and is starved for a spark. He leans in close enough for her to feel his breath, but pulls away at the last second, leaving her desperate for a kiss that never lands. As Lily walks out into the blinding daylight, she smiles. Completely unaware of her own tragic downfall, we blindly chase the fire to warm our cold hands, rarely noticing the moment the flames begin to quietly lock around our wrists. We have all watched someone walk willingly toward the edge of a cliff, right? Let us watch the mechanics of her fall. A montage shows 4 agonizing days of silence. The camera captures her staring at her phone, the withdrawal eating her alive. Dominic does not chase her. The spider merely waits in the dark. On the fourth night, swallowed by the shadows of her lonely bedroom, her resolve breaks. She sends a text. His reply is instant, terrifying proof that he has been sitting in the dark, watching the web. He asks what is on her mind. Her fingers hover over the glowing screen before typing a single fatal confession, him. The phone instantly rings, shattering the quiet. The hardest lesson we learn is that silence is often the loudest weapon a person can use against us. The ringing stops. His rough voice spills into her dark bedroom, pulling him right into her space. The camera focuses on her shivering in a thin shirt, a visual echo of her defenselessness. Tears stream down her face as she whispers her tragic truth. She is obsessed with a man who haunts her nightmares. Dominic does not offer comfort. His voice is cold iron as he tells her that her terror is exactly where she belongs. To him, love and fear are just two different chains to hold her down. She begs him, her voice cracking, to tell her the truth about his life. He answers with a long, agonizing silence. It is a profound truth of the human heart that sometimes the very things we desperately beg to understand are the exact things that will eventually destroy us. The silence finally breaks with a lie. He murmurs that he simply manages interests. Before the evasion can settle in her chest, he drops the trap door. He commands her to come to his private estate for dinner. No public restaurants, no prying eyes. Only him. His voice drops into a dark rhythm, promising her absolute safety. A beautifully sick paradox from the man actively hunting her. The warning sirens in Lily's mind are deafening, begging her to drop the phone and lock her door. But the camera catches the exact moment her spirit completely breaks. Her eyes fall shut, and she whispers a quiet yes. He dictates every detail of her arrival. Our most devastating surrenders never happen on a battlefield. They happen in quiet moments when we hand over our freedom and call it romance. A soft, mocking chuckle echoes through the receiver as she tries to set a tiny boundary. Then, a sharp click. The dial tone rings out. He denies her the final word, a brutal reminder of who holds the power. Cut to the next afternoon. The visuals shift to cold, calculated movement. A sleek black sedan pulls up. The same massive enforcer from the warehouse stands by the open door, a silent shadow doing his master's bidding. He shuts her inside with a heavy thud that sounds like a vault locking. As the car slithers away from the bright, crowded streets into an endless stretch of iron gates and obscene wealth, Lily watches her old life vanish in the rearview mirror. It is a sobering reality that taking the easy ride often costs us the very road back to who we used to be. The gates part to reveal a fortress of cold stone and glass. The immense scale of the estate is meant to crush her spirit before she steps out. The driver mutters that his boss never does anything halfway, a grim omen of the ruin awaiting her. The heavy doors swing open, and Dominic stands in the fading light. He wears faded denim, sleeves rolled over scarred arms. It is a brilliant, manipulative costume designed to make him look human in a house fit for a dark king. He holds out his hand. The camera pushes in as she places her trembling fingers into his palm, willingly walking into the mouth of the beast. We must remember that the most dangerous traps in life are rarely built with cold, rusted iron. They are almost always softly lined with pure gold and warm velvet. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? The camera follows them deep into the very heartbeat of his world, a pristine kitchen built of cold marble and unforgiving steel. He pours a glass of dark red wine, making absolute sure their fingers brush against each other. It is a calculated test of her trembling response. The lighting catches his faint, terrifyingly gentle smile as he forces her to speak her entirely justified fear of being trapped here, alone with him. And then the true performance begins. He starts to cook. Watching a powerful, dangerous man perform such a warm, nurturing task fractures the mind. It makes the predator look like a protector. But the painful lesson we must all learn is that cruelty wrapped in warmth is still cruelty. Her eyes widen, surprised that a man who commands such dark authority does not rely on a shadow army of servants. Dominic seizes the moment perfectly, slipping into a beautifully crafted vulnerability. He speaks softly, claiming this simple act of cooking is his only true escape, painting a tragic, lonely portrait for her to pity. The shadow of the room shrinks until she is the only thing he sees. He leans in and names her deepest insecurities, washing them away by calling her beautifully rare, kind, and wildly genuine. He becomes a mirror, reflecting everything she has ever starved for. We often confuse a beautifully tailored cage for salvation, simply because the architect knows our favorite colors. She is no longer his prisoner. She actually believes she is his chosen queen. The air in the room grows incredibly heavy as he steps into her intimate space, closing the gap until she can clearly see the striking gold flecks buried in his dark, unreadable eyes. She can literally feel the devastating heat radiating from his chest. Then comes his most brilliant, terrible trick. He whispers, telling her to demand that he step back. It is the ultimate illusion of choice. Her rational mind screams to run, but the trauma bond is already hardening into stone. She freezes, utterly paralyzed by the war between wanting safety and craving a destruction. He rewards her silence by tenderly stroking her hair. Sometimes, the hardest lesson in life is realizing that a cage does not magically become a home just because the door is left wide open. She is entirely his. Come with me. We are going to watch this tragedy unfold together. Notice how his thumb slowly traces the delicate line of her jaw. Every gentle touch is a masterclass in pushing boundaries. When he swears, he will always catch her. When she falls, he is planting the most dangerous lie a damaged soul can tell. The lie that he alone is her savior. The sensory weight of the scene is staggering. The aroma of perfectly seasoned pasta and warm bread acts as an emotional narcotic. He lowers his voice, speaking of his late grandmother, to reveal a perfectly bruised inner child. He claims Lily is the very first person to truly see him. It is a powerful reminder that the most dangerous predators do not hunt. The camera pans slowly across the towering mahogany bookshelves, the dim amber light catching dust motes in the heavy air. Notice how Dominic leans against the leather chair, framing his violent pathology not as a sin, but as a sacrifice. In his own fractured mind, he is no criminal. He is a dark messiah, bearing the crushing weight of the world so others do not have to. When Lily looks up, her eyes wide and glistening, whispering that his life sounds so terribly lonely, the trap snaps shut. He weaponizes her love for literature, offering a sanctuary of bound pages to mask his iron cage. It reminds us of a bitter truth. Sometimes the most dangerous prisons are built out of the very things we love the most, meticulously crafted to hold our hearts captive. The scene shifts to the heavy silence of the car ride, the streetlights rhythmically washing over Lily's pale, trembling face. Back in the library, she confessed that books were her only escape, and Dominic brilliantly positioned himself as her ultimate refuge. When she looked into his eyes and whispered she no longer wanted to disappear, we witnessed the tragic birth of her devotion. She is stepping off the edge, mistaking a predator's gravity for love. As he escorts her to her door, his broad shoulders dominate the hallway, suffocating her space. She admits she is terrified. He simply nods, validating her fear while ignoring that he is the danger. We must always remember that someone cannot be your safe harbor if they are also the storm threatening to drown you. Let us step into the soft morning light filtering through Lily's doorway, where Dominic lingers like a shadow reluctant to leave. You and I know what this is. He praises her bravery, his voice a low, soothing hum, rewarding her submission with a fleeting sense of worth. By noon, a massive crystal vase of white roses arrives. The scent is suffocating. Emma, her co-worker, gasps at the romance of it all, completely missing the velvet-wrapped chains. Lily stands there, fingertip tracing a soft petal, unable to explain the creeping dread in her chest. She is isolated, cut off from the world by these beautiful things. Love should never feel like a golden cage, yet she is quietly laying the very bricks of her own tragic imprisonment. Notice the erratic rhythm of her breathing as she stares at her phone. She feels completely seen by him, yet a cold terror gnaws at her stomach. Her gut screams at her to run, but the roots of this tragic bond are already digging deep into her bruised heart. When his reply chimes instantly, it feeds a hunger she didn't know she had. Always listen to that inner warning, because ignoring it invites the wolf inside. The quiet library shatters at precisely 2 o'clock. A co-worker bursts through the doors, face drained of blood, whispering about dangerous men in the hall. The camera tracks the panic in Lily's eyes. This sudden, violent intrusion is the brutal hammer blow destined to lock the iron gate of her psychological cage forever. The men who step into the fluorescent glare are not like Dominic. There are no expensive suits or soft words here, only the raw, ugly stench of violence. The tallest of the thugs steps into a tight close-up, demanding she come with them, spitting out Dominic Lavelle's name like poison. Her deepest fear is realized. Loving a monster simply makes you pray for other monsters. The man's jacket falls open, revealing the cold steel of a gun resting against his ribs. The sound of the library goes dead silent. She has a sickening choice: surrender, or let innocent blood spill right here on the carpet. The terror paralyzes her vocal cords. She is entirely defenseless, trembling under the lights, tragically primed for the devil to play savior. Now, picture the heavy wooden doors violently slamming open just as her legs give out. Dominic steps into the frame, a dark monolith flanked by his own armed ghosts. He does not shout. He merely sweeps his cold, dead eyes over the thug gripping her arm. His silence is deafening. A masterclass in pure dominance. With a voice barely above a whisper, he commands the man to let her go. The sheer gravity of his presence makes the rival's hands shake. Lily stumbles forward, sobbing, and he pulls her behind his broad shoulders. The framing here is everything. He becomes an eclipse, blocking out the sun and the danger alike. Sometimes the hands that shield us from the storm are the ones that summoned it. She crowns him her only hope. What follows is the quiet, terrifying snarl of an apex predator defending its kill. Dominic stares down Rousseau's men, claiming total ownership of the room. When Lily tugs his sleeve, begging him to consider the innocent students nearby, he twists her mercy into a weapon. He vows that if they ever look at her again, he will drown them in their own blood. True power never needs to shout, and true love does not need to threaten. But the real tragedy happens after the thugs flee. He turns, framing her tear-stained face in his large, warm hands. The camera moves in tight. For a split second, a genuine, desperate fear flickers in his dark eyes. It is the ultimate emotional lock. She sees a terrified king, completely forgetting he is a monster. Watch his hands tremble as he runs them over her arms, checking for broken skin. He pulls her hard against his chest, forcing her to listen to the frantic, hammering rhythm of his heart. That sound becomes her anchor, pulling her deeper into the suffocating ocean of his control. He orders them out, stripping away her choices under the guise of keeping her safe. By the time they reach his black car, he is barking orders to surround her house with guards, sparing no expense. He is building a fortress of shadows, and we all know a fortress you cannot leave is just a beautifully decorated prison. Then he whispers a broken apology into her hair. Beware the tears of the man who hurt you. Her defenses crumble, sealing her tragic fate. You and I are going to look closely at this moment, right here in the dimly lit hallway. The camera pushes in tight on Dominic's face as the mask finally slips. Lily demands the truth, and his answer strikes her like a physical blow. He calmly confesses to managing underworld territories, painting his organized violence not as a moral failing, but as a noble crusade to keep the chaos at bay. He is a mafia kingpin, sanitizing his own brutality with terrifying grace. Because he saved her life first, her mind twists the sheer horror of his reality into a desperate gratitude. Notice how her breathing quickens, yet she does not run. It teaches us a haunting lesson. When gratitude is deeply manipulated, it can easily blind us to the darkest of monsters standing right in front of us. Let us look closely at this scene, you and I, because it holds a mirror to our deepest flaws. The camera lingers on her face as the cold logic of a hostage takes over. She calculates her own worth to a rival syndicate, completely detached from her own humanity. But Dominic shatters that clinical distance. The lighting shifts, casting a warm, deceptive glow as he vows to burn the entire city to ash before letting a single spark touch her. It is an apocalyptic promise of love. She whispers how utterly insane this all is, fully aware she should vanish into the night. Yet, she doesn't move an inch. As his hand engulfs hers in the quiet dimness of the room, you can see the irrevocable tragedy taking root. The life lesson here is terrifyingly simple. Sometimes, we crave the fire that is destined to burn us alive. Why does she stay when the door is wide open? He answers for her, his voice a low, hypnotic rumble in the tight space of the car. He claims they share the same undeniable gravity, bleeding his dark desires perfectly into hers. When her voice trembles, asking what she should do, he delivers the ultimate trap wrapped in velvet. Let me protect you. The scene cuts to her apartment, bathed in soft lamplight. He moves through her sanctuary with the silent grace of a wolf, sweeping every corner for enemies. Seeing this violently dangerous man among her delicate books creates a surreal, intoxicating visual contrast. We learn a hard truth by watching her fall. When we invite a wolf into our home to chase away the shadows, the sanctuary quietly becomes his cage. The camera pulls back to reveal the invisible walls closing in around her. He dictates the terms of her new reality, detailing the armed guards who will shadow her every step, masking this absolute control as an act of profound devotion. When she shakes her head, arguing she cannot breathe in a life like this, his eyes go completely dead. He plainly states his protection is not a choice. Then comes the devastating emotional pivot. The lighting catches a fabricated, agonizing sorrow on his face. He whispers that she is too pure for his corrupted world, playing the broken soul flawlessly. And heaven help her, she reaches out to comfort the very man holding her hostage. It reminds us of a tragically common flaw, our desperate, beautiful need to heal others often makes us completely blind to our own slow destruction. Let us look at this piece together, because the mechanics of her downfall are agonizing to watch. The camera zeroes in on Dominic, searching her wide eyes for a crack in her armor. Lily confesses her fear, yet her feet remain planted. He offers her the door, a cruel illusion of freedom designed solely to make her choose the chains. As she takes a fatal step toward him, we witness the tragedy of her conditioning. He cups her cheek, his thumb, brushing her skin with a gentleness that betrays the blood on his hands. Outside the rain-streaked window, a heavy black vehicle idles in the dark. She gazes at it and feels deeply cherished. The lesson here lingers long after the scene fades. The most inescapable prisons we will ever find ourselves trapped inside are the ones we mistakenly decorate to look like love. Step into this timeline with me and watch how quickly a mind can fracture. In merely 7 days, Lily is engulfed in a tragic cognitive dissonance. She knows his world brings death, yet her fingers tremble as she types a message to check on his safety. His swift reply builds a beautiful, hollow fortress around her mind. He paints his violent street war as a righteous, romantic crusade, fought solely for her honor. The camera finds her curled on the sofa, her cat purring gently, surrounded by the expensive comforts he provided. She is being shadowed by gunmen, yet completely pacified by the mundane. It is a sobering reminder for all of us. We can easily grow accustomed to dancing on the edge of a deadly cliff, just as long as the person pushing us is the one who remembers to play our favorite music. The descent into darkness is painted in quiet, subtle strokes. It begins with the realization that he quietly paid her rent for months, binding her with an unspoken debt. The scene shifts to late nights, a single lamp illuminating the rare books he leaves at her door. They trade whispered secrets in the dark, exchanging highly curated vulnerabilities. When she tearfully admits her deep terror of never being a good enough writer, he anchors her with the fierce validation she desperately craves. This manufactured certainty becomes her world. Even from afar, his shadow looms massive. He orchestrates a bloody turf war against his rival, Rousseau, while simultaneously playing her divine protector. It is a devastating truth of human nature. We often fall completely in love with the person handing us an umbrella, entirely unaware they are the one who seeded the storm. By the 4th night, the cinematography turns cold and grand as she is transported to his heavily guarded estate. He sensed a mere flicker of hesitation and instantly pulled the most lethal string he had. He whispered that he missed her. In that singular, heart-wrenching beat, every rational defense she possessed simply shattered. She looks out the window of the speeding car, flushed not with terror but with a tragic anticipation. When the heavy oak doors open, he is waiting. He lets his shoulders slump, offering a masterclass in calculated exhaustion to summon her deep, nurturing instincts. When she steps into his arms, burying her face against the solid warmth of his chest, her panicked heart misinterprets captivity as peace. It shows us how terrifyingly easy it is for a starving, lonely soul to mistake a beautifully decorated cage for a loving, forever home. Every frame of this new environment is designed to warp her reality. The golden hour light spills across a lavish stone terrace, making the brutal world outside melt away. As they sit together, he feeds her a heartbreaking narrative of his own chronic loneliness, positioning her as the absolute cure to his tortured existence. He then plays his most brilliant move yet, escorting her to a separate, elegant bedroom to soothe her trembling nerves. By loudly declaring that she holds total power over her own safety, he silences the last ringing alarms in her mind. She gazes into the heavy eyes of a ruthless syndicate boss and sees only a wounded boy. We learn a vital truth in this quiet moment. The greatest danger in life is rarely the obvious threat holding a blade, but rather the poison we willingly choose to drink simply because it tastes incredibly sweet. There is a suffocating intimacy in the way the camera lingers on them in the sprawling, firelit library. They sit in companionable silence, reading, perfectly simulating the quiet comfort of a marriage spanning decades. When her eyes flutter shut, he completely ignores her previous boundaries. He scoops her up, carrying her limp body up the staircase, while murmuring a soft endearment that floods her brain with warmth. Desperate to keep the cold reality of her isolation at bay, her voice cracks as she begs him not to leave the room. He obliges with chilling restraint, resting his heavy frame rigidly above the thick blankets. He is painting himself as the selfless guardian at the gate. It reminds us that the most profound deceptions occur when someone fully convinces us they are our protective shield, right before they turn around and become our executioner's sword. In the heavy, pitch-black silence of the bedroom, she pushes for a sliver of genuine truth, asking the man to bare his soul. Dominic seizes the shadows. He exhales a long, ragged breath, spinning a gorgeous lie about how exhausted he is by the crown he wears, how much he yearns to finally put the gun down. It is a masterful, theatrical stroke that rips through her defenses. Weeping softly, she offers her fragile heart as his resting place, lacing her fingers through his. He leans in, painting an impossible picture of a quiet, ordinary life, a life utterly irreconcilable with the violent empire he actively rules. He forces her to burn her own reality to the ground. A true tragedy unfolds when we want to believe a beautiful promise so desperately that we willingly close our eyes to the fire, slowly burning down the very room we are standing inside. The air grows dense as he pushes his psychological test to the absolute edge. He asks if she would risk her life to hold on to this fleeting dream. When she whispers her surrender, the depth of her capture is absolute. Then comes the cinematic reversal. He tilts his head, a dark smile playing on his lips, and softly accuses her of being the very thing that will destroy him. Her mind, drowned in a haze of manufactured love, interprets this terrifying blame as poetic romance. They fall asleep in this twisted state of grace. By morning, his arm is draped heavy across her chest. He is awake, clinically monitoring her breathing. It teaches us a grim lesson about human vulnerability. The ultimate victory of any manipulator is convincing their victim that a heavy set of invisible chains is actually a warm, protective embrace. The cinematography in this final frame is deeply uncomfortable to witness. He brushes his knuckles down her throat, asking if his touch is allowed, giving her a phantom sense of power inside her cage. She leans into his hand, breathless. When she asks about the impending bloodbath with Ihai's rival, Dominic silences her with terrifying promises of burning the old world down just to build her a new one. The camera bathes his unkempt hair in golden morning light, casting the devil as an innocent boy. But as his fingers trace her jaw, the calculated restraint evaporates. The atmosphere shifts into something heavy and intensely predatory. She has crossed the threshold. It leaves us with a haunting realization about the human heart. By the time a psychological trap finally snaps shut, the prey has often already fallen deeply, hopelessly in love with the hunter's teeth. Watch the frame closely here. You and I can see the exact moment the tragedy locks into place. The lighting casts Dominic's sharp jawline in heavy shadow as he whispers of broken promises. It is a terrifying performance of a man pretending to lose his grip. He tells Lily she deserves carefulness, wrapping his control in the velvet of protection, and she, intoxicated by this dark dance, demands recklessness instead. He warns her his restraint is snapping, washing his hands of the sins to come. Convinced she is steering her own fate, she closes the distance, blind to the puppet strings pulling her. The lesson is bitter, but true. We often mistake the illusion of choice for freedom, running willingly toward the cliff. The camera pushes in slowly as their bodies finally collide, sealing her tragic fate in a breathless rush of heat. What starts with a trembling, hesitant touch spirals downward into a raw display of primal dominance. He controls the physical geometry, his hands gripping her wrists, guiding her descent into darkness. The air in the room grows thick with the terrifying intimacy of a predator consuming its willing prey. He whispers dramatic vows against her throat, swearing she will be his undoing, feeding her desperate ego while masking the lethal trap. They are isolated in this cinematic vacuum, stripped of the outside world. He maintains boundaries just enough to earn her absolute trust, a gentle knife slicing away her final defenses. Just as quickly, the warm lighting cools, and Dominic pulls his psychological armor back over his shoulders. He plays the perfect gentleman, speaking in measured tones. For a few fragile hours, they drift through the grand rooms, playing house like lovers, safe from the storms raging beyond the glass. It is a heartbreaking illusion, but real life always shatters the fragile fantasies we build in the dark. A phone cuts through the quiet room. As Dominic reads the screen, the camera catches the micro-shift in his cold eyes. The manufactured softness vanishes, replaced instantly by the rigid, terrifying stillness of an apex predator preparing for blood. Lily watches the warmth drain from the room, entirely helpless to stop the coming tide. Look closely at this bitter turning point, for you and I have both seen how quickly a dream twists into a nightmare. The romantic lighting is stripped away, leaving the harsh glare of his true identity. He is the syndicate leader again. Dominic speaks of the blood he must spill against Russo, painting his brutality as a tragic, noble sacrifice made only to keep her safe. He carefully places the heavy burden of his violence onto her trembling shoulders. He demands she promise to stay hid in, locking them in a mirrored dance of manufactured risk. His final kiss at the doorway lingers, designed specifically to leave the bitter taste of impending grief on her lips. Even as she watches him walk into the dark, her soul knows the preceding piece was nothing but a beautiful lie. Morning breaks with a cold blue tint, and Lily wakes to the agonizing chill of empty sheets. It is a calculated abandonment, meant to send her heart racing into a panic. She finds him pacing the study, barking orders in his native tongue, a linguistic barrier that sharply locks her out of his world. He strips away the tender partnership of the night before, issuing cold commands about her relocation. When she steps forward, desperate to stay by his side, he cuts her down with a glare so sharp it steals her breath. Then, the masterful pivot. His voice softens into a tragic whisper, blaming the impending war for his cruelty. The truth we must accept is that pain is often handed to us by the hands that promise to heal. He pulls her close, soothing the very wound he just carved. The camera lingers on Lily's pale face as she attempts to negotiate with a monster in a tailored suit. She begs Dominic to stay, throwing her own moral compass into the fire just to keep him breathing. It is the tragic paradox of the human heart, clinging to the venom that poisons it. Dominic frames his bloody territorial disputes as acts of profound devotion. He steps into the shadows, declaring that any man touching her is an act of war. When she cries, trying to shoulder the guilt for the violence to come, he smoothly rewrites the script. He claims it is about thieves stealing his prize, reducing her soul to mere property while he wears the mask of a tortured savior. We see the heavy, invisible chains of the trauma bond locking firmly around her fragile wrists. Stay with me here, as we watch her independence crumble into dust. Dominic positions himself as the tragic hero, pressing a lingering kiss to her forehead. It is a chilling gesture of absolute ownership, laden with the promise. He commands her to trust no one but his enforcer, Carlo, cutting her final ties to the world. As the deadbolt slides into place, Carlo takes his position in the hallway. Lily is left pacing the dim light of her living room, a bird locked inside a terrifying cage. The Kingpin orchestrated this agonizing suspense by design. By making himself the source of her terror and her only salvation, he planted a dark seed. We must remember that isolation is the greatest soil for desperate devotion. In the heavy silence, the tragic score swells faintly beneath the surface. Lily tries desperately to anchor herself to reality. She dials her mother's number. She fills the pet's food bowl. But her eyes are vacant, hijacked by the looming specter of her captor's violent world. When Dominic finally calls, the lighting drops another shade colder. His voice is an empty void. He orders her to be brave, writing her into the leading role of his narcissistic tragedy. She begs him softly, tears spilling hot down cheeks, pleading with him not to speak of his own death. Her survival is now bleeding into his. He casually mentions Carlo's contingency plans, a brilliant stroke of psychological torture, ensuring she remains tethered to his ghost. Forever waiting in the dark, notice the tragedy of his promises. Grand offers of wealth, protection, and a glittering cage. But the camera focuses on Lily's trembling lips as she rejects the gold, pleading only for the monster himself to return. It is a breathtaking portrait of psychological capture. She drops to her knees, obsessively scrubbing the pristine kitchen floor, her frantic movements mirroring the violent chaos tearing her mind apart. But the harsh glare of truth cannot be kept out forever. A phone buzzes on the counter. Anonymous messages flood the screen, carrying surveillance photos of his armed syndicate. They call Dominic the monster he truly is. It is a brutal collision with reality, tearing a violent hole in the delicate, romanticized fantasy she had so desperately chosen to live inside. When human eyes look at a predator, instinct screams at us to run. Yet the tragedy unfolds in a tight close-up as Lily's shaking thumb simply blocks the sender. Her chest heaves with a massive panic response, but she whispers beautiful lies to herself, rationalizing the stark images of his criminality because he never claimed to be a saint. The lesson is terrifying. We will blind ourselves to the darkest truths to protect a heart we have already surrendered. The phone rings again. It is Emma, frantic, whispering about a suspicious man looking for Lily. The camera shakes, mirroring the sudden escalation. The theoretical danger of a mobster's orbit has violently crashed into Lily's quiet civilian life, swallowing her entirely into a state of paralyzing, cold terror. The masterpiece of her isolation clicks firmly into place. Hearing Emma's genuine fear, Lily makes a devastating choice. She severs her final tether to the light, demanding her friend stay silent, protecting the very syndicate that holds her hostage. She dials Dominic's number, met only by the haunting beep of his voicemail. Desperate, she calls Carlo, the cold guardian of her captivity. His hollow command to check the locks only spikes her adrenaline higher. The clock ticks past midnight. No call comes. The camera tracks her frantic pacing as she unravels into raw panic, vibrating with absolute dread. She is no longer a free woman. She is a finely tuned instrument, weeping in the shadows, kept alive only by the desperate hope of her captor's returning voice. 2 in the morning. Her veins are pumping toxic anxiety, and then a heavy knock echoes through the wood. Her heart violently strikes her ribs. Discarding every logical rule of survival, she ignores the security protocols. The mere sound of Dominic's rough, breathless voice completely overrides her instinct to stay alive. She tears the deadbolt back and throws her trembling body against his chest in a desperate collision of relief. It is a massive, blinding rush of dopamine, cementing the tragic bond forever. Dominic stands in the doorway, bloodied but victorious, drinking in her frantic, devoted energy. Her sobbing accusation about his missed call is not anger. It is a broken, submissive plea. She is begging the man who ruined her peace to be the only one allowed to restore it. The camera pans slowly across the dim room, capturing the heavy irony of the moment. You and I must look closely at the shadows creeping into her haven. The kingpin steps into her civilian sanctuary, a lethal anomaly polluting the quiet space. Yet watch the subtle softening of Lily's shoulders. Her fractured mind registers the monster as a warm hearth. He stands tall, his voice a low, velvet rumble, declaring that rival factions have bent to his iron will. He whispers that he traded away empires of blood-soaked streets just to keep her safe, framing his territorial dominance as a sweeping romance. By claiming she is his to protect, he quietly erases her humanity, turning her into a prized artifact. The hardest life lesson to swallow is that true cages are rarely made of iron. They are forged from words that sound exactly like love. The lighting shifts, casting bruised shadows over her trembling hands as she offers him the surveillance photographs. It is an unsettling psychological pivot. She presents the threats like a fragile sacrifice to a dark god. Dominic studies the images with cold detachment, his jaw barely flexing. He sees only a rival testing his property. When he asks if the terror tactics worked, she shatters, mocking her own paralysis. But instead of laughing, he pulls her small frame against his chest. He reframes her deep trauma as profound wisdom, whispering that she finally sees something worth staying for. He strokes her hair, feeding his own towering ego while sealing her fate. We all want to believe we are the exception to a monster's rule. The profound lesson here is that seeking comfort from the source of your terror only guarantees your captivity. The ensuing silence hangs in the air, thick and suffocating. Our lens focuses on Dominic's calculated retreat. He turns his back, feigning a departure, a brilliant, cruel manipulation designed to ignite her deepest abandonment terrors. Right on cue, tears spill over her lashes. She begs him not to go, unable to survive the sudden vacuum of his absence. Moving toward the bed, he strips off his shirt, letting the low lamp illuminate a canvas of violent, jagged scars. This is weaponized vulnerability in its purest form. As Lily's shaking fingers trace the ruined flesh over his heart, she confesses her terrifying, emotional freefall. He whispers he has already fallen for her, the final click of the lock. The vital lesson we must learn is that a predator's wounded exterior is often just bait, designed to turn our natural empathy into our own chains. Looking up through wet eyelashes, she asks him how they will survive this. Dominic gently brushes a stray tear from her cheek. He promises they will build something real inside the hurricane he personally unleashed. The camera lingers on their kiss, a desperate narcotic exchange of false hope. She willingly closes her eyes to the madness, choosing the sweet delusion that a criminal empire can house a peaceful life. When dawn breaks, painting the rumpled sheets in sunlight, she wakes pinned beneath the heavy arm of a lethal predator, Her confused heart registers this heavy warmth as absolute security, completely misinterpreting the temporary absence of violence. Here lies a terrifying life lesson. When you live in a constant state of chaos, your tired soul will inevitably mistake the temporary eye of the storm for a beautifully clear sky. Notice the clinical precision in his movements. He can feel the microscopic flutter of panic in her veins, like a wolf attuned to a trapped rabbit. When she tentatively questions the reality of their connection, watch how he softens the hard angles of his face. He dilates his pupils, a breathtaking physical manipulation simulating genuine devotion. He spins the oldest lie-in-the-dark romantic playbook, swearing that her pure light makes him crave moral redemption. By confessing that his love for her is a fatal weakness in his brutal underworld, he artificially inflates her worth. He paints his obsession as a beautiful, doomed tragedy. It is a masterful performance. The painful lesson in this scene is to beware of those who say you are their only salvation. They are not elevating you. They are merely setting the stage to drag you down into their hell. Let us step behind the lens to witness the tragedy of this intimacy. She leans up and silences his dark confessions with her mouth, sealing her own psychological tomb. As his massive frame pins her deep into the mattress, the lighting dims into suffocating shadows. Her severely compromised mind translates the crushing weight of a known murderer into a protective fortress. When a sudden gasp escapes her lips, he pauses, pulling back just a fraction. It is a brilliant illusion of choice. By forcing her to verbally declare her trust in a man who could easily end her life, she crosses the cognitive Rubicon. He whispers that he will take his time, framing his total consumption of her body as a gentleman's restraint. A profound lesson remains here. True respect never demands that you surrender your basic survival instincts just to prove your undying devotion. The scene transitions into the acute idealization phase, playing out like a dark opera. He undresses her with agonizing, performative reverence, his eyes constantly reading her face. Do not mistake this for empathy. This is a master clockmaker, ensuring the gears of his psychological machinery are turning flawlessly. He murmurs prayers of perfection against her skin, elevating her to a hollow deity. By systematically worshipping away her insecurities, he shatters all other mirrors, forcing her to see her value only through his obsessive gaze. Her hands tremble violently as she reaches for his shoulders, signaling the final collapse of her walls. He stops, forcing her to beg for him, neatly absolving himself of the moral crime. The lesson is timeless. Someone who insists on becoming your entire world is usually preparing to completely destroy it. We are now watching the total consumption of a human identity. Stripped bare in the moonlight, she stares at the physical roadmap of his violence. The brutal scars, the terrifying power of his frame, and her broken mind perceives only a tragic, misunderstood poetry. As he shifts his weight, his sharp command to look at him acts as a psychological leash, yanking her focus entirely back to her architect. His shockingly gentle movements are the final brushstrokes of the trauma bond, seamlessly fusing her deepest romantic desires with his inherent danger. As we watch this unfold, we are reminded of a chilling truth about the human condition. It is a devastating life lesson we must all heed. We too often mistake the darkest, most inescapable cage for a warm sanctuary, simply because the monster holding the key speaks to us in a gentle whisper. Look closely with me at this next frame, and let the camera linger on the exact moment her spirit breaks. The last traces of her hesitation evaporate, washed away by a tide of sensory manipulation. He holds her tight, his voice a gravelly murmur against her ear, promising that he has her, calling her his sweetheart. It is the terrifying hallmark of a victim mistaking the absence of a knife for the presence of love. As their chests heave in the quiet aftermath, the megalomaniac tests the strength of his invisible ropes, softly asking if she is all right. She traces the rugged line of his jaw and whispers that she is better than okay, denying any regret. The victory is absolute. The truth we must carry forward is a sobering life lesson. Human vulnerability is a fragile glass, and a predator will always paint themselves as the only safe harbor in the storm they created. Daylight brings a new phase of his conditioning. He traces the sheets, his voice dripping with fabricated remorse as he laments pulling her into his dangerous orbit. Like clockwork, she rushes to shield his ego, eagerly absorbing the blame by insisting it was her choice. Time loses its shape as they linger in the shadows. Eventually, the predator pads into her tiny kitchen, cooking eggs in a surreal domestic pantomime. But the warmth is temporary. Over coffee, the temperature drops. He announces his departure, placing armed guards at her door. When she begs for normalcy, insisting she is safe, his dark eyes flash. He weaves tales of rogue elements, enforcing his absolute dominance. The critical life lesson here is simple. Abusers are master architects who construct invisible prisons, so their suffocating possessiveness as a shield of loving protection. When her trembling voice asks how long they must live like this, his response is a cold, immovable wall, as long as it takes. As the days bleed into a week, watch how she adapts to this pathological rhythm. Dominic materializes in her sanctuary under the cover of darkness, using heavy intimacy to tighten his grip, only to vanish like smoke before dawn. Her fractured mind normalizes the armed sentinels haunting her hallways. Even her co-worker, Emma, sees the terrible shift, noting a strange, feverish glow in Lily's eyes. Emma delivers a haunting warning, telling Lily she looks ready to follow this man straight into the abyss. In her silent heart, Lily agrees. That evening, Dominic escorts her to a public restaurant, testing her compliance. The essential life lesson is that our minds can normalize any nightmare, provided the demon holding our hand makes us feel chosen. This public dinner is a meticulously controlled stress test. Our lens captures her darting eyes and rigid spine. She is consumed by hypervigilance, whispering that the world is watching them. The megalomaniac simply brushes off her terror. To soothe the panic he caused, he spins grandiose illusions of tomorrow, whispering of midnight flights to Paris and neon streets in Tokyo. Tracing circles on her palm, he claims he wants to relearn the world through her innocent eyes, and she swallows the beautiful poison. Later, he drives her to a desolate overlook, severing her from the city below. Staring into the dark, she tragically confesses that her father once abandoned her on this very hill. The life lesson is brutal. Never hand your deepest wounds to a predator. They will not heal your broken pieces. They will use them as the exact blueprint to build your permanent cage. The neon glow of the city cuts across Lily's face as she whispers her deepest secret. Her father vanished when she was 12. You and I know that kind of wound never really closes. It just breeds a desperate hunger for safety. Dominic watches her, his dark eyes catching the streetlights, recognizing exposed prey. He softly admits he is pure chaos, daring her to fix him. But you keep coming back, she murmurs, mistaking the iron grip of his control for love. When she mentions the lethal reality of his world, his arrogance is absolute. He promises he simply will not die. Pulling her against his chest, he vows he will never leave. She kisses him, surrendering to the fantasy. We often choose a beautiful, lethal lie just to avoid standing alone in the agonizing dark. Only 2 weeks into their twisted romance, the outside world violently breaches their fragile sanctuary. Dust motes dance in the soft amber light of the library as Lily shelves books. Then, her phone vibrates. A sharp, clinical voice breaks the silence. Agent Sarah Martinez of the FBI. The color instantly drains from Lily's face, her pulse hammering against her ribs. She feels her protective walls collapsing. Martinez is ruthless, slicing through the denial. The Bureau knows everything about Dominic and the bloody shadow he casts over her. They demand her help to tear him down. Trembling, Lily plays the devoted captive, insisting she knows nothing. But the agent is surgical, calmly reminding her that she sleeps beside the devil, holding the keys to his undoing. The lesson here is simple. You can hide from the truth, but it will always find your number. Agent Martinez pushes harder, appealing to whatever moral compass Lily has left. Lily's first instinct is a fierce, blind defense of the man who holds her heart captive. But as Martinez coldly lists the horrors, the extortion, the brutal murders, the broken lives, a painful flicker of clarity hits her. Lily lifts her chin, her voice shaking as she fiercely rejects the victim label, claiming she already knows exactly who he is. It is a tragic, desperate defense mechanism. The agent leaves her with a haunting warning. Dominic's world will eventually turn her to ash. Left alone in the quiet aisles, Lily's hands tremble violently against the cold metal shelves. How do you reconcile the cold facts of a monster's bloody crimes with the gentle hands of a man who makes you breakfast and calls you perfect? Trusting a damaged heart is a terrifyingly foolish gamble. The harsh truth of his violence now bleeds into her fairy tale. When Dominic steps into her dimly lit apartment, the air grows heavy. Lily shrinks inward, her eyes darting away, but you cannot hide fear from a predator. He steps in close, his large fingers firmly tilting her chin up, forcing her to look at him. The moment she whispers about the FBI, his entire body turns to stone. He interrogates her with the icy calm of a killer. She admits she stayed quiet, but her voice cracks as she finally asks about the murders. Does he lie? No. He weaponizes the truth. A brilliant, sickening move. When she asks if he has actually taken human lives, he does not blink. His dark, deadened eyes lock onto hers, and he simply whispers, yes. True evil rarely hides. It expects you to accept it. Honesty, without a single shred of remorse, is just another blade in the dark. The word hangs in the air, plunging Lily into a numb, spinning void. Sensing her mind slipping away, Dominic's rough hands immediately frame her face, anchoring her gaze to his. He does not apologize for the blood on his hands. He calls it a price of protecting what is his. He twists the knife, asking if she finally sees him as a monster. When she falters, tears spilling hot down her cheeks, he plays his cruelest card. He drops his hands and takes a slow step back. That sudden, freezing distance is pure agony. He puts on a mask of noble tragedy, telling her she should leave, that she deserves the light. It shatters her. She reaches for him, begging him not to let her go. She does not want his nobility. She desperately wants his obsessive, toxic rage. We will often beg for the cage if the outside world feels too terrifying to face alone. His voice drops, thick with manufactured sorrow. He paints himself as a tragic hero, struggling to keep his dark world from swallowing her. The FBI is not justice, he whispers. It is simply a battle he cannot win. When she begs for his guidance, he strips away all right and wrong. He tells her to forget morality and just decide what her heart can carry. You and I must watch this closely. This is exactly how a predator breaks down a soul. He promises that if she turns him in, he will vanish forever. No anger, just absolute silence. He turns his broad, orchard shoulders toward the door, letting the threat of total abandonment hang heavy. For a woman starved for connection, his sudden absence is suffocating. The greatest power you can ever hold over someone is the quiet threat of simply walking away. The heavy oak door clicks shut. Dominic is gone, leaving Lily shivering on the sofa, swallowed by the silence. She is trapped in a brutal crossfire between the safety of the light and the seductive pull of his shadow. Her mind screams that this is an impossible choice, but deep down, the twisted roots of her trauma have already decided. She lies awake all night, staring at the ceiling. The cold, clinical list of his victims clashes violently against the phantom warmth of his hands on her skin. How terrifying it is to weigh the hard evidence of a monster against the intoxicating rush of being his sole obsession. By the time the grey dawn bleeds through the curtains, her spirit is entirely broken. Exhausted, she contacts Agent Martinez to set up a meeting, but she immediately tries to bargain. A true survival instinct is a very difficult thing to fully extinguish. Clinging to the last shreds of her sanity, Lily demands total immunity and protection. Martinez agrees without hesitation. Now, Lily must lie to the devil's watchdogs. She texts Carlo, the guard assigned to her shadow, claiming she needs a day to herself. When Carlo hesitates, warning her that Lavelle will be furious, she stands her ground. It is a tiny rebellion, but in this underworld, independence is a dangerous spark. The walk into the FBI headquarters feels like stepping onto another planet. Harsh fluorescent lights, sterile walls, stripped entirely of her lover's cinematic darkness. She is led into a freezing room where Martinez waits with Agent Torres, a man whose hard eyes burn with quiet disgust. Instantly, Lily's walls slam back up. She crosses her arms, clinging to her denial. You can change the scenery, but you cannot easily change a traumatized soul. Her words spill out in a desperate rush, swearing she has never seen Dominic commit a single crime. Martinez ignores the lie, smoothly circling the real prize. Lily holds the keys to his kingdom. She has unprecedented access to his bedroom, his phones, and his fragile trust. When Lily cries out that they are asking her to betray the only man who protects her, Torres loses his patience. He leans over the metal table, slamming her with the brutal truth: the destroyed families, the blood dripping from her protector's hands. Lily's breath catches. Even staring at the monster's reflection, she hesitates. Torres demands to know why. And there it is, the tragic, fatal flaw of the human condition falling from her lips. She believes she loves him. The confession hits like a physical blow. Panicked, choking on her fractured reality, she shoves her chair back, demanding time to breathe. Bursting out of the interrogation room, Lily runs for home, but her quiet apartment now feels like a tomb. Before she can even catch her breath, her phone lights up. Dominic, the invisible leash violently snaps tight. Without thinking, she answers. His voice is a low, terrifying rasp, the sound of a predator realizing his bird has left the cage. She stammers a lie about being at work, but he crushes it instantly. He has already checked. He sees everything. He asks, his tone dripping with ice. She wanted space from his men or from him. Lily stumbles over her words, completely unraveling. Then he drops the hammer. Did she meet with the FBI? Her silent gasp screams her guilt across the line. His dark fury boils over into absolute command. He vows he is coming for her right now. Suddenly, awful, violent screaming rips through the speaker, and the line goes dead. There is no escape from what you invite in. Let's take a step back, you and I, to the moment this nightmare began. Picture the quiet library. Lily is sitting peacefully when the world explodes. Deafening gunfire shatters the front windows, spraying glass like silver rain. Her body reacts before her mind can process it. She hits the floor, her phone skittering away. Through the ringing in her ears, a rough voice screams, demanding the location of Finha, the associate of Lavelle. Huddled in the dust, Lily is convinced the violence is meant for her. Fear paralyzes her throat. Suddenly, a hand grabs her arm. She flinches violently. It is Marcus, her co-worker, his face completely drained of color. He hauls her up, dragging her past frozen civilians toward the rear exit. Every tragic romance begins with a single irreversible shock to the system. The alleyway is choked with and damp brick. Marcus shoves her into the darkness, a desperate human shield buying her seconds. We track Lily as she scrambles over wet asphalt, only to hit a wall of solid muscle. The rival soldier does not even blink. His calm is terrifying. He weaves his fist into her hair, yanking her head back, whispering cold, mocking filth about her mobster lover. She kicks, thrashing like a caught bird as he drags her toward a rusted van. Then a deafening crack tears the night apart. The man crumbles, a bullet in his chest, as Carlo steps into the neon light, gun smoking. You and I often learn the hard way that survival rarely comes from running, but from the sudden, violent intervention of the very darkness we try to escape. Carlo sweeps his weapon left, dropping 2 more figures. Then the air pressure shifts. Dominic emerges from the absolute blackness of the street, his face a mask of pure homicidal stillness. He barks a raw order, and Carlo shoves Lily into the armored vehicle. Through the heavy glass, she watches Dominic coldly execute the final bleeding man on the pavement. The door slams shut, and suddenly Dominic is beside her, his hands frantically moving over her face, checking for wounds. The great kingpin is shaking. In that confined space, she misreads his possessive panic as profound, heartbreaking vulnerability. The truth is, when we are deeply broken, we'll eagerly mistake a predator's obsession for genuine love, anchoring our souls to the very hands that build our cages. The engine roars as Dominic explains the terrifying new reality. Russo has broken the laws of the underworld, and the streets will soon run with blood. He brings her to a fortress of steel and concrete, miles from the life she knew. The heavy gates lock behind them with a sickening thud, severing her ties to the outside world. He paces the stone floor, framing the public library bloodbath not as a tragedy, but as a personal insult to his crown. He calls his enemies cowards, blind to the collateral damage in his wake. We focus on her pale face as she realizes she is merely a pawn in his war. It is a harsh lesson. Those consumed by their own pride will gladly burn down your entire world just to ensure they remain the absolute center of it. She begs him, her voice cracking, to stop the violence, but Dominic dismantles her moral compass, weaponizing her very existence to justify the slaughter. He leans in close, swearing he would rather die a bloody death than live a single day knowing he left her unprotected. He grips her face, kissing her with a desperate, bruising finality before marching into the night. Left alone with the armed guards, the silence of the compound becomes deafening. She curls into a corner of the barren room and staring at the locked door, refusing to eat. Her mind is stretched like a wire, about to snap. It shows us how deeply we can lose ourselves when we let another person convince us that their destructive chaos is somehow our fault. The clock strikes 12. Shouts echo through the stone halls, sending a violent shockwave through her chest. The heavy door groans open, and Dominic stands there, his shirt painted in crimson. We watch her wide, terrified eyes, but the panic shifts the second he murmurs that the blood belongs to his victims. She slips into the role of the devoted healer, her trembling fingers tracing the shallow cuts along his ribs. When he coldly states that Russo is dead, the expected horror never arrives. Instead, a twisted wave of pure relief washes over her, followed by a sickening guilt for feeling so glad. We have to be careful in life, because the moment we start feeling grateful to the monsters who keep us safe from other monsters, we have already surrendered our very humanity. He pulls her close, swearing the threat is buried, and he is the only shield she will ever need. She wipes the drying blood from his chest, her hands violently shaking. He watches her with dark eyes, projecting a tragic need for her touch. She weeps, whispering that he should have let her die to save the others. But he silences her, declaring he would gladly reduce the entire world to ash just to keep her breathing. In that dimly lit room, the trap finally snaps shut. She presses her lips to his, tasting the metallic copper of death, willingly crossing the point of no return. She will never speak to the feds now. It is a sad truth that sometimes the most dangerous prisons are the ones we willingly lock ourselves inside, simply because we mistake the warden for a savior. The camera circles them slowly. He strips away the remnants of her old life, murmuring that nothing exists outside of them. He paints her moral decay as an epic romance. She is sacrificing her clean conscience for him, and he is risking his dark empire for her. It is the absolute murder of who she used to be. She breaks down, sobbing against his chest, even as the sane voice in her mind screams at her to run. The invisible chains of her trauma hold her fast. They stay tangled together, seeking warmth in the ashes of a massacre. She closes her eyes, accepting her doom. It is a powerful reminder that our deepest regrets rarely come from a sudden fall. They come from the quiet moments where we willingly let go of the truth, choosing a comforting lie instead. You and I must watch how the poison spreads. 3 days later, reality tries to pierce the gloom. Agent Martinez reaches out. His voice was heavy with facts, laying out the gruesome timeline of the library shootout and Russo's demise. But Lily sits perfectly still, her face a mask of absolute denial. When the agent offers a safe way out, she spits the offer back at him. She demands he respect her independence, blind to the fact that her strings are being pulled by the devil himself. Dominic leans against the doorway of his shadowed study, a proud smile on his lips as he listens to her lie. Her tragic defiance teaches us something vital. The most complete form of captivity is when the prisoner fiercely defends their own chains, truly believing they are wearing the armor of freedom. Dominic knows exactly how the feds operate. He approaches her slowly, praising the immense sacrifice she just made, sealing the dark transaction between them. She pushes down every shred of doubt, but the real world is unforgiving. A week later, she walks back into her office. The shattered glass is gone, but the air is thick with dread. Her co-workers refuse to look her in the eye, treating her like a ghost. Finally, her colleague Emma traps her in the break room. Emma's voice shakes with anger as she points out the brutal truth. Federal agents are swarming, and Lily brought a river of blood directly to their doorstep. It proves a difficult lesson. We can sweep up the broken glass, but we can never easily undo the shattered trust of the people who watched us invite the monster inside. Emma forces Lily to face the ugly reflection she has been avoiding. She accuses her of trading the safety of innocent people for the bed of a killer. When Lily tries to whisper an excuse, Emma cuts her down. The choice is made, and everyone else is just collateral. Standing alone, Lily feels a brief, sickening flash of clarity about her own selfishness. Yet, by nightfall, she is back on the Kingpin's moonlit terrace, begging him to wash away her guilt. She tells him how much they hate her. Dominic doesn't flinch. He steps into the cold light and simply tells her that he is the danger itself. And instead of running, she reaches out to comfort him. It is a terrifying reality. When we cannot bear the weight of our own guilt, we will often blindly worship the very darkness that caused it. She stares at the city lights, her voice trembling as she asks if he feels any genuine remorse for dragging her into his hell. His manipulation is a dark art. He strokes her cheek, whispering that he only regrets the pain it caused her, her ruined friendships, her lost peace. But he will never apologize for claiming her. He spins a tale of their first meeting, twisting her initial, healthy fear into a dark destiny. Hearing this, the final wall inside her crumbles. She collapses against him, sobbing out her love, fully aware of how poisoned it is. 2 weeks later, a heavy federal envelope arrives, shattering the quiet. It reminds us that we can build the most beautiful walls around our mistakes, but the harsh consequences of reality will always find a way to break them down. The document feels heavy in her shaking hands, a calculated psychological strike from the state. It warns that her proximity to the syndicate will pull her down with the ship. The ink spells out a terminal reality. She is in the crosshairs, and any continued contact means immediate prosecution. When she hands the paper to Dominic, his reaction is terrifyingly calm. He barely glances at the threats, tossing the paper onto his desk like trash. He recognizes it as a tactic to break her nerves, and rather than preparing for the storm, he tightens his grip on her, dismissing the law entirely. It leaves us with a chilling thought. The most dangerous people are not the ones who protect us from the storm, but the ones who convince us to smile as the lightning strikes. Let us look at this frame together, shall we? When the walls of reality close in, the predator's most brilliant move is to paint a door on the cage and call it freedom. Dominic proposes an indefinite exile, far beyond the reach of federal badges. As Lily hesitates, he simply waves a hand, leaving the dirty logistics to his men. He lowers his voice, playing the exhausted martyr, twisting her empathy until this escape feels like a romantic sacrifice. He sketches a beautiful mirage of a clean life in Europe or South America, funded entirely by blood money. For a woman lost in the dark romance of her captivity, this utopia is a fatal drug, just the tragic king and his captive queen fading into the dark. We often mistake isolation for peace, only to find the silence truly deafening. Lily's hands shake as she mentions the federal agent circling them, but Dominic merely laughs, a dark sound echoing the absolute arrogance of an apex predator. He spins his cowardice into gold, framing this sudden flight as a noble sacrifice made solely for her protection. It is a terrifyingly beautiful trap. By claiming he has carried the weight of the underworld for too long and now only wants her, he strikes the very core of her devotion. She looks at a man whose hands are stained with violence, yet she sees only a weary savior. Within 2 weeks, the untraceable money is moved, and her final ties to the world are severed. It is a harsh truth of our lives that sometimes we willingly hand over the key to our own prison, completely believing we are locking the monsters out. Folding her clothes into a leather suitcase, Lily quietly buries the woman she used to be. She must entirely erase herself to survive the gravity of his dark love. Standing at the threshold of their ruin, Dominic offers her a phantom choice. He gently tells her she can still walk away, knowing with absolute certainty that her broken heart will never allow it. The manipulation hangs in the room, thick and suffocating. Instead of running, she crosses the floor and kisses him, sealing her fate in the shadows. She whispers that she is safest in his arms, a heartbreaking distortion of reality. Then, from his tailored pocket, he pulls a small velvet box. It is a simple, dark lesson we all must learn. The absolute heaviest chains we ever wear in life are often disguised as the most beautiful gifts. The lid snaps open to reveal a single, flawless diamond, catching the dim light of the room. Listen closely to the words Dominic chooses. He offers no promises of peace, no quiet Sundays. Instead, he vows a fierce, consuming protection, demanding that she forsake the real world to reign beside him in his beautiful nightmare. Tears spill hot down her cheeks as she accepts. She slides the ring onto her finger, completely blind to the fact that she has just accepted a brand of ownership. He pulls her in, his kiss desperate and heavy with unspoken ruin. There is a haunting lesson in the way she holds him. We must be fiercely careful, for the most dangerous traps in this world are always forged from the desperate promises of love. Come with me and let us watch them leave in the cold, grey light of dawn. They slip away accompanied only by Carlo, a silent shadow guarding a broken king. Dominic withholds their destination until the heavy doors of the private jet seal shut. A brilliant, subtle stroke of total control. He finally breathes the word, Greece, a secluded villa he bought years ago, a stage he controls perfectly. Lily repeats the word, entirely seduced by the illusion of a grand adventure. He takes her hand, his thumb tracing her knuckles, physically locking her into this beautiful void. It brings us to a quiet realization about the paths we walk. A gilded cage remains a cage, no matter how breathtaking the ocean view outside its golden bars might be. As the wheels leave the tarmac, the tension literally drains from Lily's spine. She closes her eyes, mistaking the sudden quiet of the cabin for the arrival of genuine peace. Dominic watches her from across the leather seat. His gaze heavy and calculating, he casually asks if she regrets leaving it all behind, prodding at the edges of her devotion. She leans into him, swearing she could never regret him, offering the perfect, tragic answer of a captive who has learned to love the dark. She dismisses her old desire for a safe, ordinary life as mere cowardice. It is a fascinating, devastating thing to witness. To survive the weight of our own terrible choices, we will rewrite the entire history of our hearts, trading the quiet truth for a much louder lie. In the quiet hum of the jet, Lily arrives at a tragic revelation. She truly believes that surrendering to the darkness has somehow set her free. Their Greek hideaway is the ultimate canvas for this grand illusion. It is a breathtaking villa perched above crashing black waves, completely severed from reality. For the first week, they exist like ghosts in a beautiful dream. They sleep, they swim, and they linger in the sun, shedding the heavy armor of their violent pasts. Dominic whispers that he had forgotten what peace tasted like. But do not let the soft lighting fool you. For a man built on power and fear, peace is simply a waiting room. The hard lesson of the human heart is this: you can never find true contentment when your very soul requires a war to feel alive. The golden illusion slowly fractures under the sheer weight of too much silence. As the sun bleeds into the Aegean Sea, Lily finally asks the dangerous question. She asks if he misses the crown. Dominic's jaw tightens. He admits he misses the gravity of his old life, the rush of being a god among thieves. He sees this island as a fleeting intermission, while she is desperately trying to build a home on the stage. When asked what he truly desires, he claims he wants to be ordinary, a beautiful lie spoken by a man incapable of quiet. A king needs a kingdom, a reflection needs a mirror. Yet they push forward, exchanging rings on the sand 6 weeks later. It is a sobering reminder for us all. Dressing a wound in white silk will never stop it from bleeding underneath. I picture the tragic poetry of their wedding on that windy beach. There are no cheering crowds, only the rhythmic crashing of the tide and a local official who has no idea he is blessing a monster. The vows they whisper are steeped in beautiful delusion. Lily promises to stand by him when the shadows return, legally and spiritually binding herself to his ruin. Dominic swears she will always come first, a vow his deeply fractured soul can never actually keep. He speaks romantically of washing the blood from their hands, turning their sins into a love story. They kiss as the sun sinks below the water. In life, we must be incredibly careful of the promises we make in the dark, for the ocean always comes to collect its debts. Wrapped in the linen sheets of their marital bed, Lily feels a dangerous euphoria. She has entirely swallowed his world, transmuting their history of violence into a sweeping, cinematic victory. They whisper their new titles to each other in the dark, husband and wife, letting the words act as a shield against the truth. But borrowed time always runs out. Exactly 3 months into their golden isolation, the real world violently kicks down the door. The shrill ring of a phone shatters the afternoon quiet. It is Carlo. The federal agents have finally moved in, tearing through Dominic's empire and freezing his accounts. The devastating truth hits them like a physical blow. You can run to the edges of the map, but the consequences of our actions will always cross oceans to us. The air in the villa turns to ash as Dominic realizes his crown is slipping. For a man addicted to dominion, hearing his men lose faith is a fate worse than death. He paces the stone terrace like a caged panther, gripping the phone, screaming orders across the ocean. He desperately tries to pretend he can rule a crumbling syndicate from a beach chair. Lily watches the muscles in his back tense, recognizing the violent storm in his eyes. When she gently suggests he might need to return, he snaps, aggressively reminding her he gave it all up for her. But the phone keeps ringing. His peace was only ever a costume. It is a tragedy we see too often in our own lives. You can easily change the scenery, but you can never outrun the person you're fundamentally built to be. 2 agonizing weeks pass. Lily watches the man she loves slowly tear himself apart in the silence. Driven by a tragic, self-sacrificing devotion, she makes a fatal choice. She tells him to go back. She looks into the eyes of a killer and commands him to return to the blood, to reclaim his throne, and then come back to her. Dominic plays the reluctant hero beautifully, hesitating just long enough to ensure the departure feels like a sacrifice. Not his abandonment. She whispers that she refuses to let him resent her for taming his true nature. The heartbreak of this moment is absolute. We must learn from her devastating mistake. We so often set fire to our own safe havens, desperately trying to keep the people we love warm. Dominic pulls her against his chest, locking his emotional grip around her heart one last time. When dawn breaks a week later, he leaves. He steps back into his power, perfectly rebalancing his dark soul as he marches back to war. He kisses her softly in the driveway, leaving her surrounded by armed strangers, turning the bride back into a guarded prisoner. The moment the tires crunch against the gravel, the beautiful villa becomes an echoing tomb. Lily paces the empty rooms, existing only in the hollow spaces between his midnight phone calls. He talks of lawyers and vengeance, dragging her spirit right back into the dirt. Stay with me here, because the final lesson is brutal. Isolation without a purpose is not a romance at all. It is simply a prettier form of psychological starvation. Stick with me here, because we are approaching the absolute breaking point of this tragedy. The frame captures Dominic pressing a gentle, deceitful kiss to her forehead, promising to return in a month. He paints a gorgeous, cinematic illusion of a quiet life in a sunlit European city, a calculated dose of pure hope designed to keep her perfectly compliant. But a criminal empire runs on blood, not promises. On the 18th day, the lighting shifts to a harsh, sickly fluorescent. Carlo stands in the doorway, his posture rigid with panic, delivering the news that federal agents have critically wounded Dominic. The empire has collapsed, and here lies the most devastating lesson of all. When you choose to tether your soul to a monster, you must accept that you will eventually bleed with him. The camera captures the exact moment Mrs. Lavel's world shatters. The telephone receiver trembles against her ear as the voice delivers the brutal reality. Carlos is bleeding out on an operating table. The stoic guard by the door tries to enforce his boss's strict orders to keep her isolated on the island, an ultimate display of arrogant control. But her trauma bond overrides all logic. Watch the erratic, violent shaking of her hands as she throws clothes into a bag. She demands a boat, driven by a primal obsession to return to the very architect of her misery. During the agonizing flight back, she dials the hospital endlessly, the cabin shadows deep and suffocating. It is a stark reminder that true captivity is not held by physical walls, but by the invisible chains of a broken heart. We have finally arrived at the darkest corner of her psychological collapse. Imagine the sheer agony of those 18 hours, pacing the floor, entirely starved of information. The camera pulls back as she finally breaches the sterile, blinding white of his medical suite. There lies the megalomaniac, white machines, yet still fiercely attempting to chastise her for disobeying him. Instead of retreating, she lunges forward, her fingers bruising his skin as she aggressively claims his hand. She views these bullet wounds not as the rightful wages of his sins, but as an unforgivable attack on their dark romance, and through the tubes, he smiles. It is a terrifying lesson in human frailty. When love is forged in the fires of survival, it will eventually burn down every boundary of reason we possess. Let the lens focus entirely on the tragic intimacy of this sterile hospital room. Carlos breathes with a heavy rasp, alive only because a federal bullet shattered his shoulder rather than his heart. When Mrs. Lavel collapses at his bedside, burying her tear-streaked face against his uninjured hand, her weeping is the sound of devastating dependency. Even now, he wears his arrogance like armor, whispering that he is simply too stubborn to die. He feeds off her desperate terror to sustain his God complex, while she needs his heartbeat just to keep from falling apart. His recovery is a grueling month of physical therapy, filmed in bleak, grey tones. The lesson here is inescapable. A life built entirely on intimidation and violence never truly finds peace. It only rests until the next storm breaks. The setting shifts to a sun-drenched balcony in Barcelona, the sparkling sea acting as a beautiful lie. They have traded the overt bloodshed of New York for the quiet, legitimate facade of private security and library archives. The camera lingers on the golden hour light, painting them as a perfectly normal couple. But when the sun sets, the cinematography turns frantic. The human body never forgets trauma. Carlos wakes up, clawing at his chest, gasping for air, while she flinches at the distant slam of a door. They cling to each other in the pitch-black bedroom, two shattered souls trying to hold the pieces together. Watching the Spanish lights flicker on, they pretend the war is over. It teaches us that you can change your geography, but you can never truly outrun the ghosts living inside your own mind. Listen to the subtle wind, whipping across the high-rise balcony as she asks if he regrets stepping away from his violent throne. The camera catches the slight, dangerous tightening of his jaw. He admits he misses the power, but spins it perfectly, claiming her love justifies his abdication. He even offers her the illusion of choice, asking if she wants to go back to the darkness. She fiercely refuses. He pulls her into his chest, rationalizing every drop of blood they spilled as a necessary step to reach this fragile peace. They stand framed beautifully against the endless night, wrapped in an exquisite portrait of mutual denial. Yet, the shadows below are thick with unseen threats. It is a sobering reminder that a life built entirely on beautiful lies will always tremble when reality comes knocking at the door. The final shot slowly pulls away from the couple, letting the vast, indifferent darkness of the city swallow them whole. His enemies are still out there, sharpening their knives, yet Carlos and Lily insulate themselves in this tragic romantic fantasy. They believe their love is a shield strong enough to stop bullets. As the first pale stars puncture the sky over Spain, a fleeting shadow of absolute clarity crosses her face. She knows deep down that this is no fairy tale. Their days will forever be haunted by the violent ghosts of their past, but she closes her eyes and leans into the chaos, choosing this beautiful delusion, and that is the ultimate heartbreaking truth of the human condition. We will gladly walk through hell and embrace a monster just to avoid the terrifying reality of standing in the dark, entirely alone.